Warcrimes. They are a staple of Rimworld, and today I'm going to learn from a guide to efficiently and effectively commit some war crimes. This wonderful 4-star guide will equip us with the vast knowledge on how to actually play Rimworld. First, we're going to start off by reading through the guide index, as there are several sections to ingest. We are first introduced with a subtle picture of our creator, and that's pretty much it for the introduction. So now we are actually ready to get started. My 3 starting colonists are Stone, Love, and Venus, and I also went ahead and made a ideology that is very suitable for this video. The first order of business is not to place any tables provided by this guide. This will provide our pawns with a -3 mood debuff every time they eat. So now that I've committed my first war crime technically, we are getting to the actual interesting stuff. In this guide, other labeled fun activities are now listed, and I'm going to try to speedrun the entire list. This entire list is literally just everything against the Geneva Convention, ranging from torture to child soldiers. To start off, my first encounter was with a trader in which I was able to purchase my first drug, which was smoke leaf, which would also help later on. The tribe also gifted me silver, so I assumed I would not commit war crimes against them first. Going forward, I expanded the original base and started researching, but my colonist intelligence are still back in the prehistoric era, so I just dealt with it. My goals were to research chemical weapons, mortars, and torture methods early on. So then, even though I had 3 colonists, I wanted to start recruiting more colonists through my rituals, and I get a 50% chance of having a colonist join after a successful festival. So I started construction on a ritual hall to better my chances. I then started my first festival and gained a colonist who was a complete potato. I had an idea though. I could go ahead and start my war crime spree, but I needed to know if I could do it against my own colonists. So I contacted the best source for all of my questions, my Discord.
Is committing a war crime against your own people count as a war crime? At everyone.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Not if they consent.
Exactly.
What if they don't consent?
Then it's rape.
Prison.
True at Tim Latek.
The problem was the pawn was incapable of violence, so we would be able to arrest him without him resisting, which would be willingly be accepting the war crimes, so it does not count. So I decided to down him, but we accidentally killed him. Not what we wanted, but we can go ahead and check off the war crime of willful killing. For future prisoners, I went ahead and constructed a prison cell just in time for an empire to introduce me to a free prisoner. The royal subject that they wanted me to save was an 11-year-old, unfortunately, so I went ahead and achieved a few war crimes. I went ahead and arrested him, achieving hostage and unlawful confinement. Then you can also check off forced drug use, as I administered him a smoke leaf that I acquired previously, and he unfortunately died during forced organ removal. 30 minutes later, Venus decided to go on his own rampage and tried to kill Love. This also would be an event that foreshadowed my later downfall. Then Love decided to go on an insulting spree, which made me instinctively do the arresting tactic, but I forgot that in 1.3, if you try to arrest a pawn, as soon as you pick them up, they're prison. Now looking back, I could have just released Love, but I didn't. I guess I'm just as smart as my own colonists in that way. Then Randy gifted us with a transport pod crash, in which I now have our second prisoner on hand, and I decided to go ahead and make a human meat food restriction for him. Venus then began his second episode of his rampage and ended up killing Love and Scout in the process, unfortunately, leaving him as the only colonist. My plan so far is far-fetched from what I intended, as I only wanted to get 1 prisoner and complete a spree of about 8 war crimes, but now my colony is just in shambles. Venus then fed Tail human meat, so that completes the forced cannibalism, and another festival was done, with Venus being the only attendee, which led to another colonist named Stumpy to join. Shortly after, a group of passerbys came through, and I decided to arrest at least one of them, as the other resisted. I then tortured the arrested passer, and he came down with an infection. I had achieved the war crime of torture, but I wanted to execute him without a fair trial, and I wanted to do it with the ritual, but he was unable to move, and his infection was about to kill him, so I quickly executed him in his prisoner cell, and that was my mission accomplished. A deserter quest then popped up later on, and I was already in bad terms with the Empire, and I needed more colonists, so I accepted it. Right after, a cougar starts hunting the deserter. I gather my colonists to help out, and the best timing occurs as after, Venus goes on a binge as he is tending to the deserter's wounds. Stumpy is left to fend off the Imperial chasing after the deserter, and the cougar gets back up from being down and hunts Stumpy. I wish I was making this up. I had to send Stumpy to attack the Imperial as Venus was out in the open, but he was downed. With the injured deserter left, he missed most of his shots in the rain and Stumpy is being kidnapped. But luckily, Stumpy got up from being downed and escaped, and the Imperial ended up leaving. My colonists now started to get upset over not raiding for a while, so I sent a few pawns to go clear out a local outpost with only one defender and a turret. The outpost also had some really good loot, and as they arrived, Dora was in a daze, but I navigated with Stumpy, and we ended up taking out the raider and the turret, and the reward was a plasma sword, an Eltec's helmet, and robe. When the group returned home, I decided, even with the massive amount of research that I already had, I wanted to purchase most of our equipment for the raid from a local Outlander Union settlement. So I take advantage of Venus's crafting skill and mass-produce parkas to sell for now until I find another product. A wild woman ended up entering the map, and I sent my colonists to capture her. Later on, I found out she was actually 16 years old, which is still legally considered a child, so I enslaved her, gave her armor and a knife, and as the next raid came along, she fought in it, and now I achieved the task of child soldier. And then 30 minutes after, she ended up revolting, and she returned to being a prisoner now. Next, Venus went on a tantrum and destroyed the nutrient paste dispenser. I don't know what's wrong with him, and we could not reconstruct it because none of my colonists can construct. And to finish up my first day of the session on this colony, I gathered the colonists up for a festival, and another colonist ended up joining named Mr., and that concluded my first day of playing. To start off day 2, I streamed the gameplay live on Twitch and started off by recruiting Bucky as she was converted to our ideology, and I then sacrificed Evantia for moral gain. A trader arrived carrying chem fuel, in which I bought to make mortar shells later on. My colonists then started to get upset again for not raiding in a bit, so I sent them to a stash. I can deal with this. This is getting a little too out of hand, Oh, they're aggroed on Venus. That's good, actually. Venus, just run. Run, Venus, run. Just run, Venus, run. Just run. Nice, keep running. Nice. Good job, Venus. Good job, Venus. Oh, good job. You aggroed. Unfortunately, this item stash did not count as a conquest, but we persisted on. While that caravan was up north, however, I sent them to a local trader and checked if they sold any supplies that I needed for my raid. My next order of business was to enter the ancient danger that would house some riches, in which I hope for enemies to be a few insects, but holy fucking cannoli. So then we took out the mechs and then also took out the ancients while using landmines, which is a war crime. I also stripped them of their armor and took their weapons. I then sent a caravan to a worksite to actually count as a conquest. A while into the journey, a raid occurred. In my effort to take the raiders out, one of my colonists was downed and kidnapped, but I took out the last raider. As I rescued my pawn, a group of wild boars started to swarm me. I quickly tended to Mr., but then Venus became catatonic. The boars weren't mad anymore after a while, and I needed Mr. to make a cooler in the prison cell as the prisoners were getting too hot. Mr. then was downed from being sick, and my caravan successfully raided the camp and returned quickly. But sadly, when we returned, Mr. died, but Venus was saved. Shortly after, a group of refugees wanted to join us, so I ended up taking them in. Then a catastrophe happened. As the refugees became too comfortable and decided to snag a couple of my ambrosia, I had to make a statement. All right, I've had it with these damn people. You're not stealing my damn ambrosia. Hey, you know what? Fuck it over, baby. About an hour later, I did an effigy burning to recruit another colonist named Trujillo, and I arranged a gladiator fight between a couple of prisoners. A combat supplier came through, and I purchased some phosphorus grenades, and some bot head-ass raiders sieged me, and I yoinked all their gear. Coming into the last stretch, I sent a caravan to obtain all of the rest of the combat supplies that I needed for my raid to commit my last war crimes in one fatal swoop. Alright, well, that's all that I can afford. We did get a lot. I'm very proud. When my caravan returned, I had some rituals ready to be done. It was Decemberary, so I decided to have Christmas. I also did an effigy burning, had a festival, but in between all of this, Dor died from sickness. But who cares? We discoed the night away. At this point, our mood was at an all-time high after all of these celebrations, so we gathered all of our war crime supplies and set our path to immortality. And you remember that caravan that gave us silver when we first started? and I said that I would not commit war crimes against them first. Well, they technically weren't the first people I commit war crimes against, but they will be the last. So we set off towards the tribal encampment. When we arrived, I started bombing the settlement with the white phosphorus shells as well as my other illegal shells that I had. The Zerg of tribal Neanderthals swarmed like ants, but in between my suicide bomber, my ARs, my dragon breath shotgun, my tear gas, and my white phosphorus nades, they felt the wrath of the first world as I committed 10 war crimes about in a single raid. Shortly after the rain cleared, I burned and pillaged the entire settlement to the ground and completed my list. And this concludes the gameplay of Rimworld, but only war crimes.